42. Episode 42. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 42 with me, your host, Dr. John Pierce, Coffee with Doc. Many of you don't know that in this cup is no coffee. Why? Because it's after 10 o'clock, and I can't have caffeine after 10 o'clock because my DNA profile said that I don't metabolize it well, and I could have told you that before the DNA test. So, cheers to a little salt and water. All right. Today, I want to talk to you folks about something I've been doing for the last few years, is with deliberate cold exposure, and something I've recently added, deliberate heat exposure. I'm going to dedicate this episode to my wife, Keisha. And why is because she keeps asking me, why are we doing this crazy shit? So I've pulled up the research and I wanted to kind of go through some of the data, give you guys some information on the health benefits and some protocols for both deliberate heat exposure, sauna, and deliberate cold exposure, either cold showers, but I prefer cold plunge. So with no further ado, let's plunge into this. So when it comes to the heat exposure, one of the things that I like people to know, and one of my first questions is, well, kind of what's the optimal temperature? And for the traditional sauna, that's about 180 to 210 degrees, more specifically 176 to 212. But just keep it simple, 180 to 210 if you're in that range. I know the one at the gym that I go to is at 180. I keep my one at home around 200 to 210. I've done a little hotter than that, and I will tell you that I feel like I'm literally in an oven because I can feel like the tips of my ears. And then when I breathe in, if I breathe in too fast, I can feel it burning, in the mucosa. So I think anything above 210, it might be a little too much, personally. So that's kind of the optimal temperature for the traditional sauna. The infrareds are about 120 to 140 degrees, so markedly lower, and that's 50 to 80 Celsius for you folks that might be listening in any other part of the world besides the U.S., because everybody else uses metric except for us. And from my scouring of the literature, what it sounds like to me is if you're going to use the red light sauna, you're going to want to stay in there about 20 to 25% longer than the times I'm giving as it relates to the traditional dry or what's called Finnish sauna, like from Finland. And to that point, most of the evidence that I looked at and the robust evidence in this is surrounding traditional Finnish type sauna. The duration, 15 to 20 minutes per session. Sometimes you can get down to 10. But as you'll see, most of the protocols have you doing multiple sessions in one day. So beginners should probably start at 5 to 10 minutes and then acclimate over about a 2-week period of time. The frequency, about 4 to 7 times per week. That seems to be the sweet spot for maximum risk reduction, though 2 to 3 times a week still offers some significant benefits. Timing, preferably, after I looked at a lot of the literature, doing it after cardiovascular exercise seems to provide the most benefit. But I do mine in the morning. There might be some benefit to doing in the evening because once that heat comes down and your body starts cooling off, that cooling off does help improve your sleep. So, I would suggest see what works best for you is that timing, but post-workout is pretty much optimal, primarily with the most benefits being showed post cardiovascular exercise. So the health benefits of the heat is, it's an exercise mimetic. So it does mimic a lot of the benefits that we get from mild to moderate intensity cardiovascular exercise by increasing heart rate and cardiac output. That's not saying you shouldn't do your cardio. Ideally, do the cardio first, but you can get some additional benefit from just doing the heat exposure. There's a reduction in mortality. So frequent users, 4 to 7 times per week, show about a 40% reduction in all-cause mortality and a 50% lower risk of cardiovascular-related disease or death, excuse me. There's some definite long-term health benefits. Vascular function, it seems to improve endothelial function by increasing nitric oxide bioavailability. And nitric oxide, and we've talked about this before, but it is produced in the inner lining of the blood vessel and the endothelium, and it relaxes the blood vessel. So it allows for better compliance. And that reduces arterial stiffness as well. So one of the issues with hypertension or high blood pressure is poor compliance. So as more blood flows through the vessel can't relax enough to allow that extra flow to come through. So then the pressure in the system goes up. So a dry sauna can help lower blood pressure. And that is also demonstrated in the studies with a reduction to about 8 millimeters of mercury. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're running 130 and now all of a sudden you're running 122 just by doing some sauna, that's reduce your risk for long-term heart and health problems. It does also help with the immune system and has anti-inflammatory properties. Regular use is linked to lower levels of C-reactive protein. That's a test that we do here in the office. And this is a primary marker of systemic inflammation. I look at C-reactive protein as a marker of health of the endothelium as well. So if that level's low, it indicates a healthy endothelium. So if you get your cardio C-reactive protein tested by your physician, you want to get the sensitive one and ensure that your goal is to have that under 1 and preferably under 0.55. If it's above 1, you got to work on getting it down. The dry sauna can be a tool that you can utilize for that. The immune activation, we see heat exposure triggers a transient increase in white blood cells and cytokines, mimicking a fever state that primes the immune system against pathogens. So pathogens are the things that make us sick, viruses, bacteria, things of that nature. So by doing the heat therapy, we get an upregulation to our immune system. So if there's a pathogen in there, it's more likely to encounter some of our soldiers in white blood cells, and they're going to destroy it. So it's a good way to help keep yourself from getting sick. Brain function, neurohormones. There's an improvement in brain-derived neurotropic factor, BDNF. So the heat stress increases the BDNF. And what BDF does is it supports the growth and survival of neurons, and new neurons in particular. So, that's important. We want to keep the brain healthy. There's a neuroprotective aspect of this as well. It activates heat shock proteins. These help prevent protein misfolding, a key factor in Alzheimer's and dementia. So high frequency users of sauna see a 65 to 66% lower risk of dementia, to include Alzheimer's disease. With the neurohormones, it triggers the release of endorphins for mood. It does have a calming effect. I've noticed that. And norepinephrine for focus, while significantly reducing cortisol levels. So, when we wake up that first hour, our body is producing a little bit more cortisol. We want that at that time. So I wouldn't recommend doing the sauna within the first hour of waking up, but then afterwards, do the sauna. Well, this is perfect for that, because within that first hour of waking, there's a few things that you really should be doing. One of them is hydrating. So, 16 to 32 ounces of fluid with some salt, electrolyte replacement. So you replenish your fluid state and replenish your salt states and get moving, because that cortisol will help you as you start moving. So if you go out and do some cardio, mild to moderate intensity, and then get in the sauna afterwards, you're getting the best of all worlds. And you've only been up for an hour, and you've, almost like what the old army slogan says, you've done more before 6 o'clock in the morning than most people do all day. It just depends on what time you get up. But that is the case for me when I do my sauna. So um, just food for thought, right? Recovery, pain, and mobility improvements. So muscle repair, massive spikes in growth hormone. One study showed up to a 16-fold increase if done once weekly. But this was in younger patients, and I read that study. They spent an hour in the sauna, and the temperature was much lower than the 180. I think it was at 160. So, but they did some gradations of it. Even there's a 15-minute and a 30-minute and an hour. The 15-minute got like a twofold increase. The 30-minute was like fourfold, and the hour got like 16-fold, if I recall correctly. But the 16-fold was pretty impressive after 1 hour a week in one session. As you know, and we've talked about growth hormone before, that's a misnomer. Growth hormone should be called recovery and repair hormone, because that's what it does. And so you're actually helping in your recovery and repair just by using a dry sauna. Pain management, it's effective in reducing stiffness and pain in arthritis, fibromyalgia, and chronic headaches. I can tell you, as I have a lot of osteoarthritis to the point where personal information, but I've had joints replaced because of my osteoarthritis. I feel a whole lot better after the sauna. I combine mine with cold immersion therapy. We'll talk about that later, but my joints really don't feel bad at all afterwards. And I will tell you that I do that about 2 hours or so after I wake up. And shortly after I get out of that, I take a nap. My body is like ready for a little extra sleep. So if you were to decide to do this before bed, you may find that it improves your sleep. So everybody's different. Blood flow. Enhanced circulation delivers nutrients and oxygen to damaged tissues, speeding up recovery from intense exercise. Why? Because of the vasodilation from the nitric oxide and the improved endothelial function. Stress management and sleep. Autonomic balance shifts the body from sympathetic, the fight or flight, let's go, to more parasympathetic, rest and digest, repose. So it really helps in the recovery that way. In sleep quality, over 83% of users report improved sleep. The subsequent cooling of the core body temperature after a session serves as a natural biologic signal to initiate deep sleep. That's why I'm saying, if you did 15 to 20 minutes before you went to bed, you're probably going to shower off, because you do tend to sweat a lot in there after that. But you may find that it improves the quality of your sleep, and 83% of people show that improvement. A couple practical tips and safety ideas. So I talked about hydration. The recommendation is to drink at least 16 ounces of water for every 10 minutes of sauna use, and supplement with electrolytes, as I mentioned. Contraindications, not recommended for pregnant women or those with unstable cardiovascular conditions. Also, men who are concerned with fertility should be aware that repeated heat exposure can temporarily reduce sperm count, which rebounds after cessation. So there's a lot of health benefits. However, if you're somebody who is having issues with pregnancy, things of that nature, you may want to refrain from doing the heat. Or I've heard where guys have brought ice bags into the sauna with them and placed them on their groin while they're doing the sauna. So the body's getting all the benefit, but you're keeping the boys chill. All right. On to deliberate cold exposure, cold plunges. Recommendation for protocol. So the temperature. And I see all kinds of stuff out there on social media, but these are the temperatures that have been studied. Aim for 50 to 59 degrees. I tell you, I got in my pool Wednesday and it was at 50 degrees after the sauna. It's plenty cold enough. That's a therapeutic range. Advanced practitioners may safely descend to about 40 degrees. Anything below that, I think you're risking potential issues. So I would be careful. This is not a testament of your strength or how tough you are or anything like that. You're putting your body in an environment that it doesn't want to be in, and that's helping your brain in the anterior cingulate gyrus. It's helping that grow. You're learning to deal with stressful situations, but you're not trying to hurt yourself. So do it safely and get all the benefits and minimize any potential negative downsides. The duration, beginners should start at 1 to 2 minutes. Intermediate users typically aim for 3 to 5 minutes, with a maximum safe limit generally recommended at 10 to 15 minutes to avoid hypothermia. I personally think that that 10 to 15 minutes is too long because I think you really run the risk of cooling your core temperature. Dr. Susan Soberg recommended no more than 11 minutes per week based off of her studies. So with that information, I wouldn't recommend anybody go to 10, 15 minutes. However, this is what some of the studies do show. So I did want to share that with you, but my personal recommendation would be stay in that 3 to 5 minute if you're a little bit more experienced in this, and 1 to 2 with a couple weeks to acclimate to get to 3 to 5 minutes. Frequency, about 3 to 5 sessions per week. Standard for metabolic and mood benefits. This talks about the highlight of the 11 minutes per week as a threshold for significant fat loss and brown fat activation benefits. Dr. Andrew Huberman spoke about this when he spoke with Dr. Soder on his podcast. Timing, perform sessions early in the day to leverage the spike in alertness, avoid cold plunges for 4 to 6 hours, following resistance training, strength training, as the anti-inflammatory effect can blunt muscle hypertrophy. So you can do it in the morning or do it on your off days. That's when I do it, is the days that I don't train to not affect muscle gain, but I do sauna after training. So you can do those. And we'll get into my protocol and then kind of benefits of doing both. Health benefits, a dopamine spike. Cold exposure can increase baseline dopamine levels by up to 250%. Unlike the short spikes from caffeine or electronics, your video games and your TikTok and that stuff, this elevation is sustained for hours, enhancing focus and mood. If you're one of those people that get up in the morning and have to have your cup of coffee, I challenge you to do your cold plunge in a safe range and get into that 3 to 5 minute range. And I bet you won't want coffee afterwards. And if you do have it, you're going to find it has a very amplified effect. At least that was my experience. There's also a norepinephrine surge. Levels of this neurotransmitter can rise up to 530%, leading to immediate increase in alertness, arousal, and cognitive function. And then there's top-down control, repeatedly forcing oneself into the cold trains top-down control, where prefrontal cortex overrides the reflexive fight or flight response, building mental resilience and stress management skills. I'll tell you my technique, because when I first get in there, ounce of my being says, get out. And, you just got to, weather the storm per se. Usually takes personally 10 to 20 seconds of, I would consider almost controlled panic breathing, but it's, and then once I go, okay, I got this, and the initial shock's over, I work on box breathing. And so I do a 5 second box. So therefore, each respiration is 20 seconds, and 3 respirations is a minute. And then I do 9 respirations, and I've done my 3 minutes plus that little extra time of me getting used to the water. So that's my recommendation for it. I also set a timer, and I found after setting the timer that I tend to count slower, believe it or not. So if you would have asked me, I said, well, maybe I count a little fast because it's cold, but I think I'm trying to push myself a little harder. So I tend to count a little slower and stay in there a little longer without the timer. Cardiovascular metabolic health. So vascular tonicity. Cold triggers intense vasoconstriction followed by vasodilation upon exiting, which acts as a workout for blood vessels and improves overall circulation. This was something I learned years and years ago when I first got out of the military. So I was 21, 22 years old, and I was looking at Bulgarian training principles. And after working out, they had recommended cold, hot showers. And it was cold, hot, cold. And you ended on the cold. And it did refresh you after working out. And so that kind of supports some of this. And I didn't know, maybe a lot of people didn't know the science behind it then, but I started doing that then. But I didn't keep up with it. I wish I had. Brown fat activation. So brown fat is actually metabolically active. It's fat that is full of mitochondria. And so cold stimulates the non-shivering thermogenesis and the production of brown adipose tissue. Unlike white fat, brown fat burns calories to generate heat, improving metabolic rate and insulin sensitivity. If you have insulin sensitivity or you're type 2 diabetic, you can start doing cold plunges, and it will help to reduce your insulin sensitivity. It will reduce your glucose levels, and it will also help to lower your cholesterol because you're burning the fat. Pretty neat that you can do all this stuff with just getting in some cold water. Recovery, pain, inflammation. So there's an anti-inflammatory response. Cold lowers muscle temperature and restricts blood flow, which reduces swelling and markers of inflammation like pro-inflammatory cytokines, TNF alpha. I will tell you that personally, when I get out of that cold plunge, nothing seems to hurt. I've in my old home, I was able to run up the stairs afterwards, and usually I can't run up them because my knees hurt too bad. But after coming out of that, I could run up there, maybe because I was trying to get next to my fireplace to get warm. Maybe that's why I was running up there. But I can tell you that a lot of the normal aches and pains get better. But this is also why we don't recommend doing it after resistance training, because you want that inflammation to encourage muscle growth. Pain management, it provides acute relief by numbing pain signals and is used effectively for chronic conditions like arthritis and fibromyalgia. Like I said, I personally can attest to the effect of this and its benefits. Exercise recovery, especially beneficial for endurance athletes or those with back-to-back events. It significantly reduces DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. So that's the soreness that we get a day or two after a workout, and everybody goes, oh, that's lactic acid. Well, that's bullshit. It's not lactic acid. It's delayed onset muscle soreness. It's inflammation in the muscle belly. Lactic acid burn is while you're doing the exercise, that muscle starts burning during the exercise. That's from lactic acid. If it's 2 days later or a day later, that's just inflammation. Deliberate cold exposure can help reduce that. And I've seen it. I personally, doing some things in the gym I wasn't used to. I was expecting to be very sore, and did the cold plunge on my off day. And the next day I did, talked to one of my training partners, and they're like, man, my legs are killing me. And I was like, mine aren't. And I really didn't put 2 and 2 together until, reading a little bit more about this. So, pretty neat. Immune function in sleep. So it boosts the immune system. Regular practitioners often show a higher white blood cell count and may take up to 29% fewer sick days than non-users. If you listen to Wim Hof and his cold exposure plus his breathing techniques, he's done the studies where they've actually injected E. coli into people's vasculature and they're not getting sick. And the average person, that can kill you. So I don't know where he got the IRB approval for that, but it must have been over in Europe someplace. But pretty impressive stuff. But cold absolutely helps improve your immune system. Sleep quality. While it spikes alertness initially, doing it earlier in the day supports the body's natural circadian rhythm. This subsequent drop in core body temperature after the initial shock can signal the brain to initiate deep sleep cycles. So you can see, that a lot of these things are mimicked: improving the immune system, improvement in sleep, improvement in cardiovascular health. So now, we're going to talk, in 2 seconds, we're going to talk about what happens when you combine them. Some safety considerations when it comes to the cold therapy. The cold shock, the initial gasp response, and heart rate spike can be dangerous for those with heart conditions and or high blood pressure. That's why a lot of these cold plunges are relatively safe because they're not so deep. I wouldn't recommend just jumping into a deep pool, but if you've got a pool that's only 3 feet, assuming that you're taller than 3 feet or 4 foot, then you can get in that safely. But if you're only 4 foot tall, then you might want to be careful in a 3 foot deep pool, because you only got a foot and your head might not be a whole foot. And if you are gasping for air, that could be relatively dangerous. So, but pick your environment and be safe is the whole point. Active warming. After exiting, allow the body to re-warm naturally. This is called the Solberg principle, to maximize the metabolic cost of thermogenesis rather than jumping immediately into a hot shower. Consultation. Always speak with a physician if you have vascular conditions like Raynaud's or a history of cardiac issues. If you have Raynaud's, the recommendation, especially like a cold plunge, is to keep your fingers or your hands and feet out of the water. Just be careful. All right. So now it's time to talk about the combination, combining deliberate heat and cold therapies. This is often called contrast therapy. Creates a synergistic effect that acts as a vascular workout, potentially amplifying the benefit of each modality alone. Additional benefits of combined therapy: the vascular pump effect, alternating between heat and cold. So vasodilation with the heat, vasoconstriction with the cold, creates a rhythmic pumping action that accelerates circulation, aiding in the delivery of nutrients and more efficient removal of metabolic waste. Enhance autonomic flexibility. The rapid shift between temperatures extremes trains the autonomic nervous system to transition more efficiently between fight and flight and rest and repose, sympathetic and parasympathetic, which can improve overall stress resilience and heart rate variability. Superior inflammation reduction. While cold reduces acute inflammation, pairing it with heat helps maintain joint mobility and muscle flexibility, preventing stiffness sometimes associated with cold-only therapy. Metabolic synergy. Combining heat's exercise mimetic effects with cold's activation of brown adipose tissue can lead to additive gains in metabolic rate and insulin sensitivity. Anti-aging and detoxification. The combination may further stimulate autophagy, or basically breakdown of cells. Your body destroys old cells and builds new ones. It's called cellular cleanup, and the production of heat shock proteins, which we discussed earlier, potentially reducing biological age by 3 to 5 years with consistent use. So, combined protocol, frequency about 3 to 4 times per week. 3 to 4 times per week is recommended for general health and longevity. Sequence: always begin with heat to prime the body and muscles. End with the cold. That's the Soberg principle to maximize metabolic benefits and post-session alertness. Duration per cycle, the sauna 10 to 20 minutes per cycle, the cold plunge 1 to 3 minutes per cycle. Number of cycles or rounds, 2 to 4 rounds or of alternating back and forth is typical for a full session. I usually do, personally, if you want to know, either just depending on my time, I'll either do 10 minutes of the heat and 2 minutes of the cold, and do a couple rounds, 2, 3 rounds of that, or I will do 15 heat and 3 of the cold. So that's my personal program. I put together a little getting started checklist for beginners. Consult your physician first. Make sure that this is safe for you. Next, hydrate. So drink at least 16 ounces of water with some electrolytes per 10 minutes of heat session that you're planning on doing. This is a little another caveat. If you're doing like 20 minutes and then you're going to do 3 minutes of the cold, you want to give a little bit of time before getting back into that sauna. So you want to maybe take 10 or 20 minutes. So that's another time that you can drink another 16 ounces of water, go use the bathroom, do whatever, and then go back and do it. So, cause you're thinking, well, if I do 4 rounds and I do 10 minutes a round, now I got to drink 64 ounces. Yeah, but just take a little bit of time in between it because we want that brown fat to be active, right? Start milder. So use the temperature of 140 infrared or 160 traditional and 60 for the cold plunge to acclimate. So don't go too crazy with it. Yeah, use the 1 cycle rule when you first start. So just complete just 1 round of heat and cold for the first week to see how your body recovers, and then slowly progress, just like anything else. If you want to run a marathon and you're not a runner, you're not going to start off day 1 running a marathon. You got to start, with your first half mile and then a mile, and eventually you'll get to 26 or 28 or however long those things are. I'm never going to do one because it doesn't interest me. For those folks that like it, enjoy it. Control your breath. In the cold plunge, focus on slow 4-second exhales to suppress the initial gasp reflex and stay calm. I really recommend something like box breathing. So you're focused on that. You're really when you can control your breathing in that environment, it's extra special. It really is. To be able to control your breath in that fight or flight sympathetic response is difficult. So maybe start off with a 3 or 4 second box, but you will very soon be comfortable with a 5-second box, I promise. Natural rewarming. So after the final cold plunge, towel off and allow your body to rewarm naturally for 10 minutes or so before taking a warm shower. That one's a little tough, I can tell you, but you can do it, and we have faith in you. Also put a sample weekly contrast therapy and workout schedule. We'll go ahead and post this, so you guys can look at it. But it's pretty simple. So let's say Monday you're gonna do some strength training. That day you're gonna do no cold plunge. Use the sauna only 20 minutes to aid blood flow without blunting muscle growth signals. Tuesday, rest and recovery day. Full contrast session, 3 rounds of sauna, 15 minutes, and then cold plunge for 2 minutes. End on the cold plunge. Wednesday, cardio and endurance training. So the contrast session, 2 rounds. Immediate cold exposure after cardio is excellent for reducing DOMS. This is true, but we also know that there's more benefits to doing the heat after the cardio. So I would stick with heat, cold, heat, cold. Thursday, strength training. No cold plunge. Sauna only for 20 minutes. Focus on hydration and heat shock protein activation. Friday, active recovery. Full contrast session. 3 to 4 rounds. Focus on deep breathing during the cold transitions. Saturday, high intensity cardio. Short contrast, 1 to 2 rounds. Great for clearing metabolic waste and lowering systemic inflammation. Sunday, full day of rest. Optional sauna, 20 minutes for relaxation, stress management, and improvement in sleep quality. A couple tips with the integration. The hypertrophy rule: if your primary goal is building muscle size, avoid the cold plunge for at least 4 hours after lifting weights, as it can interfere with the natural inflammatory process needed for muscle repair. I personally suggest you just stay away from the deliberate cold exposure on the days that you're doing your resistance training. Thought you might want to consider doing it beforehand. I used to do that. I no longer do that. I feel that also inhibited my muscle gains. Total weekly cold time. Aim for a cumulative 11 minutes of a cold exposure per week across your sessions to trigger significant fat loss and brown fat benefits. Total weekly heat time. Aim for 57 minutes of sauna per week, spread out over 4 to 7 days, to see a 40% reduction in all-cause mortality cited in major studies. So Roderick will take this sample weekly contrast therapy and make it available to you. But I'm glad to share this with you. This is something that I've personally been doing. And again, I dedicate this to my wife, Keisha, because it will help to answer her questions of why the hell are we doing this? So thank you for sticking with us for another episode of Coffee with Doc. Next week, I think we're going to have a guest that you guys will really appreciate. I'm going to try to get in one of my physical therapy docs in here so we can talk about some of the different modalities in the physical therapy world. Thank you, and look forward to seeing you next week.